Hi, thanks for watching. Today I'm just going to read you a sermon, but not just any sermon. This sermon is called The World as a Graveyard, and it's by Christmas Evans. Christmas Evans was born December 25th, Christmas Day, 1766, grew up in poverty and suffered great abuse and was illiterate when he was 17 years old. He was also in a fight and lost his eye. The same time he lost his eye, he was called into the ministry. He was mentored by a Presbyterian minister, and through that, Christmas learned how to read and write and speak English and Welsh, and he became this really prolific pastor that was known for preaching pictures, turning the ear into an eye, because he was so descriptive and imaginative in his sermons. So, The World as a Graveyard takes some poetic license, but it is beautiful, and I just wanted to make a record of it because it was really profound when I read it. So, Christmas Evans, The World as a Graveyard. "Methinks," exclaimed the impassioned preacher, "I find myself standing upon the summit of one of the highest of the everlasting hills, permitted from thence to take survey of the whole earth. And all before me I see wide and far-spread burial ground, a graveyard, over which he scattered the countless multitudes of the wretched and perishing children of Adam. The ground is full of hollows, the yawning caverns of death, and over the whole scene broods a thick cloud of darkness. No light from above shines upon it, and there is no ray of sun or moon. There is no beam, even of a little candle, seen through all of its borders. It is walled all around, but it has gates, large and massive, 10,000 times stronger than all the gates of brass forged among men. They are one and all safely locked. The hand of divine law has locked them, and so firmly secured are the strong bolts that all the created powers, even of the heavenly world, were they to labor to all eternity, could not drive so much as one of them back. How hopeless is the wretchedness to which the race is doomed. Into what irrecoverable depths of ruin and sin plunge the people who sit there in darkness and in the shadow of death, while there by the brazen gate stands the inflexible guard, brandishing the flaming sword of undeviating law. But see, in the cool of the day there is one descending from the eternal hills in the distance. It is mercy, the radiant form of mercy, seated in the chariot of divine promise. She comes through the worlds of the universe. She pauses here to mark the imprisoned and the grave-like aspect of our once fair world. Her eye affected her heart as she beheld the misery and heard the cry of despair borne upon the four winds of heaven. And she could not pass by nor pass on. She wept over the melancholy scene, and she said, "Oh, that I might enter. I would bind up their wounds. I would relieve their sorrows. I would save their souls." An embassy of angels commissioned from heaven to some other world paused at the sight, and heaven forgave that pause. They saw Mercy standing by the gate, and they cried, "Mercy, canst thou not enter? Canst thou not look upon that world and not pity? Canst thou pity and not relieve?" And Mercy in tears replied, "I can see and I can pity, but I cannot relieve." "Why dost thou not enter?" inquired the heavenly host. "Oh," said Mercy, "law has barred the gate against me, and I must not, I cannot unbar it." And Law stood there watching the gate. And the angels asked of him, "Why wilt thou not suffer Mercy to enter?" And he said, "No one can enter here and live." And the thunder of his voice outspoke the wailings within. Then again I heard Mercy cry, "Is there no entrance for me into this field of death? May I not visit these caverns of the grave and seek, if it may be, to raise some at least of these children of destruction and bring them to the light of day? Open, justice, open. Drive back these iron bolts and let me in, that I may proclaim the jubilee of redemption to the children of the dust." And then I heard justice reply, "Mercy, surely thou lovest justice too well to wish to burst these gates by force of arm, and thus to obtain entrance by lawless violence. I cannot open the door. I am not angry with these unhappy people. I have no delight in their death or in the hearing of their cries as they lie upon the burning hearth of the great fire, kindled by the wrath of God in the land that is lower than the grave. But without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. So mercy expanded her wings, splendid beyond the brightness of the morning when its rays are seen shooting over the mountains of pearl. And mercy renewed her flight amongst the unfallen worlds. She reascended into midair, but could not proceed far because she could not forget the sad sight of the graveyard world, the melancholy prison. She returned to her native throne in heaven of heavens. It was glorious. It was a glorious high throne, unshaken and untarnished by the fallen fate of man and angels. And even there, she could not forget what she had witnessed and wept over, and she weighed the woes of the sad world against her doom of eternal law. And she could not forget the prison and the graveyard, and she redescended with more rapid and radiant light, and she stood again by the gate, but again was denied admission. And the two stood there together, justice and mercy. And justice dropped his brandishing sword while they held converse together, and while they talked, there was silence in heaven. Is there then no admission on any terms whatsoever? She said. Ah, yes, said justice. But then they are terms to which no created being can fulfill. I demand atoning death for the eternal life of those who lie in this graveyard. I demand divine life for their ransom. And while they were talking, behold, there stood by them a third form, fairer than the children of men, radiant with the glory of heaven. He cast a look upon the graveyard, and he said to mercy, accept the terms. Where is the security, said justice. Here, said mercy, pointing to the radiant stranger. Here is my bond. 4,000 years from hence, demand its payment on Calvary. To redeem men, said mercy. I will be incarnate in the Son of God. I will be the lamb slain for the life of this graveyard world. The bond was accepted, and mercy entered the graveyard leaning on the arm of justice. She spoke to the prisoners. Centuries rolled by. So went on the gathering of the first fruits in the field of redemption. Still ages passed by, and at last the clock of prophecy struck the fullness of time. The bond which had been committed to the patriarchs and the prophets had to be redeemed. A long series of rites and ceremonies, sacrifices and oblations had been instituted to perpetuate the memory of that solemn deed. At the close of the 4,000th year, when Daniel's 70 weeks were accomplished, justice and mercy appeared on the hill of Calvary. Angels and archangels, cherubim and seraphim, principalities and powers left their thrones and mansions of glory and bent over the battlements of heaven, gazing in mute amazement and breathless suspense upon the solemn scene. At the foot of Calvary's hill was beheld the Son of God. Lo, I have come, he said. In the bond it is written of me. He appeared without the gates of Jerusalem, crowned with thorns and followed by the weeping church. It was with him the hour and the power of darkness. It was with him the hour and the power of darkness. Above him were all the vials of divine wrath and the thunders of eternal law. Round him were all the powers of darkness, the monsters of the pit, huge, fierce, and relentless were there. The lions as a great army, gnashing their teeth, ready to tear him to pieces. The unicorns, a countless host, were rushing onwards to thrust him through. And there were the bulls of Bashan roaring terribly, the dragons of the pit unfolding themselves and shooting out their stings, and dogs, many, all round the mountain. And he passed through this dense array, an unresisting victim led as a lamb to slaughter. He took the bond from the hand of justice, and as he was nailed to the cross, he nailed it to the cross. And all the hosts of hell, though invisible to man, had formed a ring around it. The rocks rent. The sun shrank from the scene as justice lifted his right hand to the throne, exclaiming, "Fires of heaven, descend and consume this sacrifice." The fires of heaven, animated with living spirit, answered the call. We come, we come. And when we have consumed that victim, we will burn the world. They burst, blazed, devoured. The blood of the victim was fast dropping. The hosts of hell were shouting until the humanity of Emmanuel gave up the ghost. The fire went on burning until the 9th hour of the day. But when it touched the deity of the Son of God, it expired. Justice dropped the fiery sword at the foot of the cross. And the law joined with the prophets in witnessing to the righteousness which is by faith in the Son of God. For all had heard the dying Redeemer exclaim, "It is finished." The weeping church heard it and lifted up her head too and said, "It is finished." Attending angels hovering near heard it, and winging their flight, they sang, "It is finished." The powers of darkness heard the acclamations of the universe and hurried away from the scene in death-like feebleness. He triumphed over them openly. The graves of the old burial ground have been thrown open, and the gales of life have blown over the valley of dry bones. And an exceeding great army has already been sealed to our God as among the living in Zion. For so the bond was paid and eternal redemption secured. That's pretty awesome. The World as a Graveyard by Christmas Evans.